whether you do a great job today or whether you could have done something better, that should not impact your self-worth because it's not what you're doing, it's who you are that's more important.
Welcome back to Educator University. Teachers are some of the most dedicated, high-achieving people out there, but that drive can come with a hidden cost: perfectionism. Today, we're joined by Zarina Derveni, a certified life coach with an MBA in business management from Schulich. She helps high-achieving women, including educators, overcome perfectionism, self-doubt, and overthinking. Welcome, Zarina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so good to have you. And you really do have a background with high achieving. That MBA you got was very, very hard to get. I actually was not familiar with that before I was looking into you. And I was like, whoa, this is a big deal that you got that MBA from that school in particular. It's very hard to get into. So I'm sure you've had your own things with that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So that was actually an executive MBA. So you basically were sat with a bunch of different executives from all these like large corporations, and I remember we did a full study into even like Costco was one of the examples of just how like operationally it runs and how like the warehouse stuff runs, and it was real life experiences. Costco was one. We had the two, three different other companies that we had to work on as executives. So it was interesting to see everybody who's working in real life come together and solve a solution for various companies. So yeah, helped a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of high pressure and maybe even perfectionism in what you had to do back then. And what you're doing now is kind of helping people with that idea of how do they handle perfectionism. So I'm kind of curious, how do you handle or how do you define perfectionism and why do you think it's so common in teachers and educators today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something I struggled with personally. So I love the question because it's as a coach or as a professional service, it's service professional, sorry. It's easy to answer questions that are logic, but when you've personally been impacted and experienced it, there's just much more depth to it. So really, it is defining your worth to this ideal of flawless outcome, right? That's when you think of like what perfectionist is. It's you have this ideal mindset that perfectionist is a flawless outcome. Now, anybody that knows, life and human beings, life is not perfect. And we know that logically, but subconsciously, we still have these high expectations of ourselves. And it's definitely common, among high achievers in general. But when you're looking at the teaching industry, I mean, first of all, it's public, it's high stake. You've got pressure from all sides, right? Like here you are, you know, kind of like grounding and teaching the newer generation there. That's a lot of pressure, right? It's definitely something that I have compassion for when it comes to teachers because I can understand, the pressure they put on themselves. It's not only internal, but it's very much so influenced externally. So really, when you look into the idea of perfectionism and why it exists and how we ourselves, especially women, put so much pressure on ourselves, and it's linked to imposter syndrome. We feel like reaching for this perfect ideal is a false sense of protection.
Yes. And I'm kind of curious, someone listening might be thinking, okay, as a teacher, I might be in this camp, I might be perfectionist, but I'm not sure, like, are there things that might be showing up in my life in the classroom, maybe in and out of the classroom, that would be indicators that I am maybe having some perfectionism in my own life?
Mm-hmm. Overanalyzing, big
Mhm.
one, huge, right? And it is linked to being a perfectionist as well as an overthinker. But the moment you're starting to overanalyze, over prepping, right? That's another one. I've heard of overgrading before, right? So I think those are probably three more common ones, but definitely the overanalyzing is one. And if you're somebody who, let's say you've got these ideas, right, that you want to implement, if you put them to the side until you maybe think more about them or until you get them just right, just perfect, that also qualifies as falling under this ideal of perfectionist.
Yeah, I think as teachers, sometimes we get into our routines of what works for us. And so, kind of sometimes changing it up, trying something new can be a little bit intimidating. And that's where that perfectionism can also be shown, and where you're like not trying things that are new because you're afraid of how maybe it will interact with the class that you're not sure of. It's a little bit of question marks as you think about that.
Yeah, and look, it's scary, right? Especially when you're thinking of implementing something new. It's definitely scary because you don't know how let's call it the pilot or trial period is going to go, but that's what that's there for, right? And we'll get maybe into it a little bit deeper later in some of the other questions, but I definitely think, the moment you've got this idea and you're putting it to the side until you can like perfect it, I think that's a really good indicator that you're just overthinking and overanalyzing it. I think, yes, you've got an idea and maybe you need more time to fill in the blanks. That's a different scenario, right? But I think once you start and finish, those should be the two main milestones that you focus on. The in between, the middle part, that comes with experience, right? That comes with results, that comes with data, and you cannot get that until you start. So,
Yeah, just start, because you never know where it's going to go. So I think that overthinking, like you said, does go hand in hand with perfectionism. Do you have tips on how to break that cycle of overthinking? Because sometimes you get kind of stuck in a cycle. It feels like you're in the circle that you can't get out of. So do you have like tips on how to kind of break that cycle?
yeah, I mean, it's so vicious. And, a lot of what I do, so I am a life coach, but I'm also being certified right now to be a brain coach. And it doesn't change much of what I am. But I think for me, what I've noticed is how powerful our mind is, how powerful, sorry, our subconscious mind is. So a lot of this perfectionism and overthinking is linked to the subconscious mind, which, 95% of our habits, our thoughts, our behavior, our emotions are all happening in the subconscious mind. So I think the first rule is understanding that a lot of what you're thinking and doing and feeling and your patterns of behaviors are in your subconscious mind. And a lot of that data, I'm going to call it data, is maybe from 10 years ago. Maybe it's from even your childhood, right? So let's just question why we're on autopilot day to day and why we're having these thoughts. Is it to our benefit? I've never heard of anybody say overthinking got me here. It's yes, there are components in life, especially in business, where you have to be analytical that it helps, but it's a short period of time, right? So, kind of bringing it back, there are things that you can do to help for sure. And I think self awareness and understanding that probably what you're thinking and what you're doing is linked to your subconscious mind. So, let's tap a little bit into conscious mind and question some of those behaviors, question some of those patterns, question some of those values that we have of even perfectionism. I used to value people who were perfect. I'd be like, oh, wow, look at them. Like, that's great. And look at the results and look at the effort. Now, do you know that, like, I actually connect more with people who are much more open to trying and failing and being more vulnerable and adaptable? Like, your mindset really shifts when you start to really look into, like, what your thoughts are subscribing to you that you think is right, when in reality in life, it's all about trial and error. And it's all about having that resilience to go out there and try. And when you fail, how do you adapt? That's much more empowering to me now versus perfectionism because I know the price people pay for that. Right. So, and it's a lot. But there is this imposter syndrome solution, and it's by Dr. Valerie Young. She has the Imposter Syndrome Institute to a T, and one of the originals that really came up with a lot of solutions around perfectionism, which is part of imposter syndrome, overthinking, not being good enough. And she recommends, actually, and it's something I bring into my coaching, it's to be a humble realist. That is the only thing that can really help. I think sometimes we think that if we sit back and look at all our successes and if we compare or if we have our girlfriends and family and friends telling us how great we are, that helps. That's very short term. Long term solution is to get your brain to start thinking of yourself as a humble realist. And by that, I mean what you can do is like, hey, I'm a teacher. I'm put on this position to do my best, take care of myself first, because at the end of the day, everybody knows people do what you do, not what you say, right? Take care of myself first and learn as I go, because that is the greatest gift you can give anybody, especially students, is having that adaptability mindset, is showing that you love yourself enough, that self-worth, that if you're going to make a mistake, you're going to fix it. you're going to acknowledge it, and you're going to move forward. And I think that's much more powerful than having this like perfection ideal that's just not attainable. It's not realistic.
Yeah, and it's funny on my channel, I've been discussing with a lot about kind of finding that balance in life because part of that perfectionism can bleed into teachers working beyond contract hours, way beyond hours that they are being paid for. And I think
Yeah.
that conversations that I've been having is talking about, hey, it's okay to do what you can with the hours you have available to you and then go live a beautiful life outside of school. And so what you're talking about is just resonating with me so much because I'm kind of already talking about that with my teachers a little bit already to think about life in a different way. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely, I think, a conversation we need more of, right? Especially now I coach women, and we put so much pressure on ourselves. So I can speak on behalf of all women and myself. I wish we made this conversation much more normalized where it's like, wow, we put a lot of pressure on things that like will it really matter in the next couple of years when we look back, like having so much of that energy efficiency, because I use a lot of that energy efficiency term, put in things that it's like, really? Does it really matter?
Right. And I think sometimes the pressure is internal. Sometimes it's kind of external too. We feel pressure from maybe school administrators or other teachers, or even maybe the board of education or the boards coming, our school board. How do you help teachers navigate that external pressure as well to be perfect?
This is such a good question, and I've actually been in a few workshops with teachers specifically, and we've talked about this specific question. And I think the one suggestion that I have made that seems to have helped is switching from this IQ mindset, so this intelligent mindset where it's like the board tells you this, the students' parents tell you this, your management tells you this. It's a lot of pressure. So when you're in your IQ mindset, everything is coming black and white, black and white, black and white, right or wrong, right or wrong, right or wrong. And then you're obviously like, crap, like I have so much expectations to meet here. You're putting yourself kind of on the outside. So it doesn't really matter what you think. It's basically like, withholding these key stakeholders and what they think, which is important. I don't want to take that away. But what I've suggested is shifting from this IQ mindset to EQ. So let's really tap into our emotional intelligence, and really what emotional intelligence is, it's your ability to be self-aware, it's your ability to be resilient, right? To be resilient, I'm sorry. And it's also your ability to bring in some empathy. And what I mean by this is towards yourself, right? Because I think teachers are so empathetic to everybody else but themselves. So having those three key elements brought in from an EQ perspective helps you see things not from a black or white, where when you're in your IQ, you see everything like right or wrong, right or wrong. It's having that gray area and understanding that you are going to meet the expectations of board members or the school board, sorry, the management, the parents when it comes to serious matters. And I think we're all aligned in what's important. However, you're going to leave room for the gray area because that's how life is. And you as a teacher are put in a position, I'm going to say this, of power because you should own it. You're in charge. This is where having your value system according to your true core value system is important, because then you can make decisions based on that versus this person said this and this person said this and and then, you're just like all over the place. So like, one of my core values is integrity. So I know if I'm going to say something, I'm going to do it, right? One other core value of mine is connection. Is being able to have that connection piece. I think that's much more influential than maybe authority in certain aspects. So, bringing it kind of back to the question, I think it's tapping into your emotional intelligence, knowing you're going to always constantly have pressure. That is never going to change. And it's being able to look at the gray area of things and knowing, okay, this is what's really important that I can align with management. This is what's really important that I can align with parents. And this is what's really important that I can align with let's say students, using that, but then also using your core values, integrating it so that way you feel in control of the decisions you're making. You have a certain compass, and there is this gray area to be adaptable because, again, not everything is black and white, and that will remove so much personal pressure. And this is something you can implement even in your own life, by the way. It's not just professional, but I find that has been the most effective versus trying to set expectations with stakeholders where in reality everybody's just doing the job. And I think it's focusing on the level of priorities that are actually important, making sure that gets done, and then the rest leaving room for gray areas and understanding that, life is full of just adaptability, resilience, and kind of moving forward. And that should be the focus versus getting everything right or wrong.
Yeah, I almost feel like one thing that I think about when you say this idea of EQ and finding your values is the idea of setting realistic goals. And I think that's something personally or professionally. Sometimes perfectionism, you're thinking too much. Your goals are like way too high for the amount of time maybe that you thinking realistically with the time that I have, what can I actually achieve and narrowing down and actually feeling the success of achieving those realistic goals can probably be a lot for teachers to also feel that success.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, right? And I think sometimes our focus on results takes up a lot of our energy and we lose sight of that journey. So let's just remember, let's take it back, right? And we're living in a very, very fast-paced world, especially now with AI. Like it's just getting so scary how fast everything is going. So I think now is the time to really set back and say, okay, what can I do really well? Like, what are my strengths? Where are there areas of adaptability, right? Where are there areas of that gray area where I can bring more of that in so I'm not putting too much pressure? And ironically, we put so much pressure on details that really like, do they really mean something, right? Because when it comes to important stuff, yes, of course, like that's important, but let's just really kind of go back to that subconscious mind. Let's just really look at where we're putting a lot of our energy efficiency. Is it really going to help you be a better human being? Is it really going to help the students be a better human being? Or is it more like a process logistic thing that it's going to get overlooked? So do I want to put that much energy there? Right. So it is an interesting concept, but yeah.
I think the more energy we put towards prioritizing allows the rest of our life to be a little more simple as teachers. Because then we already put the energy, "This is what I'm putting my energy towards." It's like, what are you gonna say no to is almost more important than what you say yes to.
So true. No, I love
Yeah.
that. That's so
Yeah.
true.
And you talk a lot about in your practice, and you've just kind of touched a little bit, the alignment of inner values and outer achievements. So you kind of just touched on that a little bit. Could you share a little bit more for tips on teachers who are thinking, I want to do more of that? Do you have ideas and strategies they could use to help find that alignment?
Yeah, so it's something I do every day since I transitioned into a life coach. I've got 3 priorities every day, right? And it could shift maybe when my life changes, but right now it's been pretty consistent for the last year and a half. Self-care is a priority. Work is a priority. Now, when I say work, work is also like my professional field, like being a life coach, as well as work in the home or whatever, some sort of like that is important to me to get things done, what I need to get done in the day. And then the third one is connection and love. So making sure that I'm making room and time for me to be able to connect with my loved ones, friends, whether I'm going to the grocery store. I don't want to be a robot. I think it's okay to say hi because that connection piece is important to me. So I'm pretty clear what my 3 priorities are every day. That when things come in that I know are not in my priority list, I feel very comfortable saying no. I don't feel guilty, right? Or when I'm spending like 10 hours a day working, or when I'm spending 2 hours a day making sure I'm eating right, taking care of my health, taking care of my skin, I don't feel guilty because it all goes back to I know what my priorities are every day. Making sure that I can call someone later in the evening and speak to them, right? Making sure I'm having that time for connection piece. I don't feel guilty because I know what my priorities are. But, it's easy for me to say this right now and be so clear. It took, years of getting to that clarity. And really, it's understanding like what is good for you, no matter what anybody says, like what is your priorities? Bringing it back to teachers, if your priority is really to connect with these students and empower them, I would question like how are we doing that, through our teaching, right? Are we being rigid? I always say, are we being professor like or are we being more of a TED Talk person, right? Because sometimes TED Talks, like if you ever listen to one, they're much more empowering than listening to a lecture. So I would challenge you, like, what are your priorities when you're at work? Is it the connection piece? Is it the process piece? Is it the influential piece? Like, really ask yourself these raw questions and then make sure that your actions are living towards it because then you don't feel drained you'll get burnout in life, but you don't get burnout when there's internal alignment. You get tired, right? and you'll know when to step away. But when you're doing things that you're good at and that you truly understand where the effort's going at, it's a different game. And you don't typically go to burnout. You get tired, but you obviously know you'll need to rest. Burnout is when you're not living in alignment. And I've dealt with so much burnout myself. I deal with it with my clients. There's always this reoccurring theme. It's just because you're not in alignment. You're doing things for the sake of doing things because your compass is not there and clear. So really, unfortunately, it comes back to us and our accountability and what decisions we're making for ourselves and how are we setting those boundaries and standards in our lives.
Yeah, and it can be so draining to be having that guilt over your head, like, at the end of the day, "Oh, I didn't do this or this or this or this." But in reality, like you said, if you had those core values in your head thinking, "Well, I did the things that I was meant to do today, and the rest I could spend the time wasting about what I didn't do, but I did what I needed to do." And I think that kind of almost gives you more energy to not feel so bad about the things that you haven't completed yet. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's honestly, even like being in the industry I'm in and knowing all this, and now even like being so equipped with brain science, because I've set those priorities, I barely ever feel guilty anymore. It's like it has like subconsciously, in a way, influenced me in how I feel and not feeling guilty to say no, where before I felt so bad or I pushed myself, and it's like it has really been a game changer, and highly recommend it.
I'm just wondering, this is my part of questions, but I'm just curious thinking about this now. I feel like women feel more guilty than men in the past about not doing all the things. Like I think about mom guilt or a lot of our listeners are women, and I'm curious, do you notice that it's more with women than men, this idea of needing to be perfect and having to do it all?
Yes, yes, and it's so interesting that you asked me this question. So the reason why I even came up with the concept of knowing your priorities every day for women is because I spend over 12 years working with men. So I've been in executive roles, and it's been phenomenal, by the way. I've loved working with men, and the one thing that I've learned working with men is they prioritize priorities. Us as women prioritize tasks. So that has been the biggest gap that I've noticed because, like, I would go into these meetings and I'd be like, "Oh my god, I have to do this, 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 this." They were all task related. And then my male executives would be like, "This is what's important, all hands on deck." Forget about what we said last week, the to-do list. Meanwhile, that's where my brain was going. So I learned pretty like midway through my career. Look at that. Like, this is so empowering. Like, they focus on their priorities, whereas like I've been subconsciously wired to focus on these tasks. And like, who cares? Like, is the task list really going to get me where I need to get 2 to 3 months? Get rid of it. So now I always encourage women. I'm like, okay, tell me what your priorities are and tell me what your task list are. And the moment they get to the task list, maybe they'll keep 1 out of 10. Everything else is irrelevant, right? So let's focus back on the priorities. So I really love that question. And that's actually the reason why it was a professional learning for me. And it started, helping me focus on priorities in business. I've actually implemented it now in my coaching and in personal development because I think it's genius to learn from men how they're able to easily focus on priorities. And then us, we're like, task focused, but no wonder we're overworked and burnt out. Like, we're doing things that are like not really focused on our priorities. We're just completing checklists.
Yeah, and that's when you get drained out, like you said, you're just doing things to do things instead of having that purpose behind it. So, yeah, as women, I think we do have to work on that. I shouldn't say all women, but a lot of women have to think about that more than maybe men would at times. So that's good to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, we're caregivers. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we are much more nurturing. All that is very true biologically, but I do encourage women to have this mindset shift or aha moment of like how much of their worrying every day to day is focused on tasks versus actually priorities. And let's talk about shifting some of that energy efficiency to priorities. Because if you're working towards that, again, I'm not saying you're not going to be tired, but the burnout, like the overwhelming, the overanalyzing, that's going to be minimized. And I think that's still a success.
I talk to teachers, and sometimes they're so caught up in their teaching role or kind of what they do, they're not even sure how to make their own priorities. And I know that sounds kind of crazy. I don't know if it's crazy to you here, but I hear that from teachers. They say, I don't even know
Yeah.
what is important to me because I've just lived my teacher life my whole life. And so, do you have tips for them to think about, like, when they're identifying these priorities, ideas for them, just a starting point?
Yes, yes. So, it's self-discovery. I'm really into self-discovery. It's a special course I teach in my coaching, but really There's 4 to 5 phases to it. The first one is the awakening, so kinda exactly what you said, like, I don't even know, what I like or what's important to me, and that is so real, by the way. Nobody, especially in adulthood, we're not taught to really do that. It's like you've got this, like, childhood, preteen, then you're put in the real world, and then you're just out there working and just basically surviving. So you don't have time to really even know, at least for the most of us, what it is that is important to us or what it is that we really want outside all the external factors and just, how life works. But it's the awakening phase. So the moment you start thinking, who am I? What's important to me? What do I really value? What do I want to feel fulfilled? Stay in there and honor that because that's very important. And most people will just, forget about it, suppress it, move on in life. But the moment you get that feeling, stay there. And that's the awakening phase and start journaling. I recommend start journaling, speak to somebody, a professional service, whether it's therapist, a coach, or watch videos online if you're not in a position to hire somebody. So there's so many avenues, but start looking at like self-discovery concepts, start looking at other videos. And the moment you start to feel like alignment with what some people are saying, that means that your body's saying, this feels good. This is what I want. This is what I want to do. Now, I don't believe, even I've worked with some of the smartest women, I don't believe clarity comes from thought. Clarity comes only from engagement, only from experience. So I hope this alleviates automatically pressure for a lot of you out there that are listening, that you don't think yourself through this, you experience it. Remember back to the journey. So once we go from this awakening stage, we then go into exploration. And this is when you start gaining clarity. You start exploring, you start trying different things that you think will work for you. It's a trial and error. It's a progress. Some clients, actually, very few clients have a linear progress here. Some have ups and downs, and it's so normal. Like, this is where you're just exploring, you're giving yourself some grace, and you're figuring out what's important to you. We do a lot of work around our values here, and again, it's a process. You really start to learn like what's important to you, and it's a mixture of like your gut, your intuition, your brain, your heart, all kind of like, aligning on things like, this feels good, this feels right. We do some rewiring with the subconscious brain, but the exploration, this is where the growth happens. This is when we go out there, experience, and this is when we start to come back and have a much more better understanding of who it is that we are and who it is that we want to be. And then once we've got those tools set, and everything is simplified, it's not complicated. Once we've got those tools set, then we go into integration. And integration is really, a lot of what we were learning in the exploration stage, which is a lot of learning and unlearning. Integration, we start implementing it in real life. And then we see, is this something that we want to stick around? And a lot of times people will improve their lives just by this 3 phase. And the fourth phase is just, being able to live more authentically, but you have to go through those phases. You can't skip it. And I just want to be clear, you cannot get to clarity in thoughts. So please, if you're spending so much of your energy just thinking and thinking and in that like thinking phase, you're really wasting a lot of your potential and energy. I encourage you to go out there and really challenge yourself to get into that exploration phase. And this is where a lot of learning and unlearning happens. But yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not always like starting a new career or something. It could be something from my, I don't know, just from my experience. For example, I like to do yoga, and that's something that I found out recent. Like more, I used to do it more, and now I've come back to it. And it's like just finding that little piece of like a hobby, maybe even could even be at the start of it. You know what I mean? For some people listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And even knowing that you want that more time to yourself to do the things that you enjoy. That's exploration though, but that's a big deal, even knowing that, right? And you don't hold, and that's why I say like clarity doesn't come from thought, it comes from experience. You don't hold yourself to that. Doesn't mean now, like for the next couple of years, that's all you're gonna do. You're giving yourself permission to allow to do things differently and to allow to do things that are actually, again, decisions made out of internal alignment, right? And it's very empowering when you give yourself that permission.
Yeah, and I think kinda coming along with that idea of feeling empowered and feeling aligned, if there's teacher listening and they're thinking, "Okay, I'm wanting more of that. I don't feel confident in myself to even make those choices. I don't feel confident in myself." And are there tips you have in terms of building their confidence in their decision-making process?
So, I think start small. That would be my recommendation. A lot of teachers are I say this with the utmost respect, but they are overachievers, are wanting to care, they're caregivers, taking care of so many people at once. And ultimately, their needs are put last, right? So I really think that to have fast progression or to have fast change, it's not effective. I don't think it's realistic. However, starting small is much more effective. So I would challenge, you to kind of like ask yourself, what are my core strengths? What do I really enjoy doing? For the longest time, and maybe because I was in corporate for a very long time, I hated that question. Like, what are your hobbies? I'd be like, what do you mean, what are my hobbies? I have no time. I'm working all the time. I used to avoid that question so much. Now I love it because I've had the time, to really think about what my hobbies are, and I can answer in a way that's not just responding, but really answering it. But going back to the question on how can teachers be more confident, I think you'd naturally become more confident once you actually know more about yourself and once you have that internal alignment. So focus on your strengths, what you like. Start small. When you start small, you implement daily habits that are actually much more effective versus having this drastic transformation that is not effective. Take it from there. And then let's not tie our self worth to what we do. Let's please reframe that and tie our self worth to who we are, because then no matter what happens around you, your self worth is not impacted, right? Whether you do a great job today or whether you could have done something better, that should not impact your self worth because it's not what you're doing, it's who you are. That's more important. So that's another, I think, key area that would be helpful. And just know, like, you're still learning. I really don't understand how people have this know it all attitude, even if you're an expert. Great. Life is all about growing and learning. You're constantly a student in life. And having that mindset of, I'm just learning is so powerful and I think so inspiring. So, really, that should help with your confidence because you're constantly refining. You're starting, you're refining. You're starting, you're refining, right? You're not aiming for this perfectionist ideal result that's just not there. Maybe in 20 years, sure. But in the meantime, let's focus on starting and refining and knowing that, you're still learning.
Yeah, powerful message. We're still learning, we're still growing, and we're still kind of figuring things out. We all are, aren't we? So I think, like, kind of wrapping up this conversation, if a teacher could take away an insight to make a shift from perfectionism to more purpose driven, what would you like it to be?
I would say to focus on observing versus absorbing your environment. There's a lot happening with teachers. It's the one industry where I genuinely have so much compassion for because there's a lot happening and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of the results are not financial where like a lot of us that work for companies, there's always this like revenue part to it. But with teachers, it's much more deeper than that. Like the expectation is just so high that it's like, oh, come on, let's really be a bit more sympathetic here. But going back to the concept of observe versus absorb. So I think that idea of observing is kind of setting back your emotions from tying it to who you are as a person. Remember the doing versus being, but setting back some of that expectations and being able to just collect data so that you're not emotionally being affected by certain things and it's becoming a bit more logic and you showing yourself more grace. So when you're observing in the state of observant, you're just looking at basically what's happening. You're not putting pressure on yourself to react. You're collecting data, and that way you can allow for yourself to make more informed decisions based on this observed mindset versus absorbing. It's taking in all that energy, all that kind of drama, all those expectations, and it's your nervous system is all over the place. It's dysregulated. It's really hard to move from there, right? So, this idea of just observe, I tell myself every day, right? Even when I go into something really big, I'm like, okay, Zarina, I'm giving you permission to observe today. You're not going to absorb. And it's a good reminder. So I'm not there, to collect drama. I'm there to collect data to help improve myself. And it's been, I think a really important shift, especially for teachers who are there every day and there's so much happening emotionally and physically that reminder to observe, or even permission to give themselves permission to observe, will help them emotionally regulate and will actually help them detach emotionally so that they can make more informed decisions that are in alignment with who they are and who they want to be as a
Yeah, I love that idea of observe, not absorb. And I think it helps because we often feel overstimulated by the end of the day. Hopefully, that will help teachers thinking about disengaging a little bit so that they have more energy in the tank when they get home to enjoy their life and explore themselves, what they want to do. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the key. That's the key, is to being your default state more in the observe versus absorb, because in life you're going to absorb. It's just the reality of it, right? But just make sure that your default is observe, and it's training. And I can't stress enough like how smart our brains are. And if we don't have control over it, and it goes back to really understanding some of those subconscious thoughts, it will overtake us. So really you have to, even like I said, I tell myself before I go into something, hey, remember, Zarina, you're going to be in an observe mindset, not absorb. Even that, it's like I'm giving myself permission to be in that state more by default versus the other way around.
yes, yes, such an important reminder. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share with teachers that we haven't yet covered today?
Being a student myself and having had so many teachers, and I think this kind of goes the same with even relationships, right? Like intimate relationships. I think it's important to know that people always remember how you made them feel versus what you said or what you taught. And I have so much respect for the education system, so I never want to take away from the content itself or context, because I think it's relevant. But I do want to say, as teachers, they have the power to really influence students. And I think putting so much pressure to make them feel good, deliver this, to do that, have the context. I think let's focus back on the priority. And it's like, are the students really feeling important? Are the students feeling the effort from the teacher? And I think that's more key really than the actual like delivery or contacts or project or material that's really being delivered. Students will always remember that. And I think that's a really good reminder.
Yeah, it allows us to release perfectionism because it's not always about the little details. It's about this bigger, wider picture of who you are as a teacher. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
love
I mean, I,
that.
I remember a few of my teachers till this day, and it's tied down to how they made me feel, how they
Yeah.
made us feel in the classroom. And that always stays there, right? Versus the material or context that I actually learned.
Yes. Thank you so much, Serena, for sharing everything today. We have some fun questions, and then I'll ask the audience where they can find you. I always ask these 4 questions just kind of about teaching, because you are a teacher as a coach, I think. So, just some fun questions here for the audience to know you. A number for the first one here is your favorite teacher lunch.
So that I've had like as a student, or
Or I'm thinking as your teacher for you teach coach clients, something like that. Do you have a lunch that you like, really enjoy? Is like your kind of go-to lunch or one that you look forward to?
yes, yes, yes. Okay, sorry. So there is this place called K&K Comfort and Kim, and basically it's vegan and it's a bunch of like, salads, smoothies. So usually I would take that, and the reason why I love it is because it's delicious and it's healthy. So we always feel good after having a healthy lunch. But yeah, it would be that.
Love it. Sounds good. Your best behavior management or emotional regulation tip?
I would have to say observe
Mm.
versus absorb. That's a big one. And the moment I say it really is impactful. So yeah, it would be
A
that.
tea Thank you. A teacher that made a difference in your life?
I had one teacher, actually, when I first came to Canada. I always remember her. She was my ESL teacher. So I will always remember her. And she was just so patient. And she was just I remember her being very warm. And I think the patience part really was helpful because I was putting so much pressure on myself, right? To learn the language so quick. And she was just like, no, it's okay. So I always remembered her. And I was always so thankful for her patience because it helped me put less stress on myself and actually learn the language at a normal rate.
Yes. It's funny because I started my career teaching ESL, so it's kind of fun that you mentioned that teacher. But that's good to
Oh,
hear.
I
It's good
love
to think you're a teacher
that.
in ESL. And so I
Yeah.
started my career in that, so love
Yeah,
it.
I know.
Okay.
Always remembered her, and yeah, it's inspiring what ESL teachers do.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Last fun question here is the last lesson you taught.
Active listening. That was a big one. So reminding people that when we are listening to listen to the words, the details. We're not listening to respond. So that was the last one that, again, I think we can always have a refresher on it because it's helpful. But yeah, active listening is about listening to the details and not listening to respond. So that was an important lesson.
Well, Zarina, thank you so much for all you shared. You brought so much value to teachers, and I know they're gonna really want to get a hold of you, maybe and get part of your coaching program. So where can they find you? And I'll also link it right below this video so you guys.
Thank you. Yeah. So I do professional and personal coaching, which is exciting. Depending, I mean, they're usually interlinked, but depending on where you want more coaching on. And I can be found online on my website. So it's www.zarinalifecoach.com. There's a contact section there. So if you scroll through the website, look at all the different services and see maybe what a key area of focus is, you can reach out to me there directly. And I do offer complimentary consultations. So we can chat for like 20, 30 minutes and see if there is an alignment between us two, if there is any desire to move forward. So, yeah,
Well, thanks again, Zarina. It was great having you on the show. Appreciate everything you shared.
thank you so much for having me. Had a wonderful time.